One of the things that I find very disturbing right now is how foreign crypto looks to more traditional Web 2-based systems. I think what's foreign to people in Web 2 is crypto and the whole culture around crypto and NFTs and all these things that have new names. The goal here is to dissolve liquidity silos that we have. It's to transform the way finance works. It's to make it so that anyone, anywhere can just connect to the internet and pay anyone else in the world and not worry about what platform they're on.
Where do you think that Espresso can be in, like, let's say 3 years?
Well,
Ben, thank you so much for being here.
thank you for having me here.
The whole point of this conversation is to be able to inform and educate the mainstream audience as much as possible about technical stuff, because I'm not a technical guy, but I think that could be a good thing if I approach it from like just a logical standpoint, trying to understand what's going on. It's not every day that, I get to have it like an expert cryptographer plus, you being a Yale professor. Maybe we can get into a little bit of your background.
Of course,
yeah, I think it's exciting to have you explain and break down these complex concepts. I'm actually just more excited to learn today. So
I think it's really important. I think that a lot of the time we get so far away from the fundamentals when we talk about crypto. And I think that still largely people don't understand crypto. It's not actually that alien of a technology if you break it down. And so I think it really is good to take these opportunities to come back to the basics, come back to the fundamentals, come back to what this technology is supposed to transform in society, where we've come, where we haven't quite gotten yet. And then I can, of course, touch on what my company, Espresso, is doing, what the Espresso network is solving in terms of what I see as sort of a missing piece to help Web3 actually achieve its original vision.
First of all, very cool name. And I'm sure we'll get to explain the origin of where that comes
Espresso.
From, things like hotshot.
Right. Espresso, the drink, brings communities together. And I think that was one of the reasons why we chose the name, because very much what we're trying to do is to unify all these disjunct, fragmented blockchain systems and bring them together, which is essential, as I can touch on in our conversation, to bring the original vision of Web3 to fruition. And so it's about bringing different blockchain platforms together, just like Espresso brings communities together. And Espresso is also very fast, right? It's a fast way of making coffee. And our key innovation, and one of the ways that we bring different blockchain platforms together, is that we're very fast, much faster than previous blockchain systems.
Everybody's obviously heard of Bitcoin,
right?
Ethereum,
right?
People might have this broad perception that Ethereum is not exactly the fastest,
right? Well, it isn't.
Well, yes. it isn't, and then cheapest. It's not the cheapest option,
right?
Maybe we can even get into why that is the case.
Absolutely.
And then sort of what your vision of Web3 should be, like what it is right now. Like, actually, how do you even define Web3?
That's a really good question. Obviously, these definitions end up blurring the lines a bit, but I would say that Web3 is all about getting web applications to communicate securely with each other without the need for centralized, trusted parties. You could even just define it through creating some solution that enables all internet applications everywhere to communicate securely with each other in real time, so very quickly. That requires building a system that doesn't require trust relationships, because trust relationships don't scale on a global scale. And I think that the need for trust relationships between businesses that interact with each other is one of the reasons why even the digital technology space is so fragmented in terms of the digital services that we use, right? Payment systems aren't integrated with each other. You have systems like Samsung Pay, you have Line Pay, you have Alipay, you have WeChat Pay, you have PayPal, you have Zelle, you have all these different fragmented systems for example, digital payments. And then when you get into trading of digital assets, you have NASDAQ, you have Shanghai Stock Exchange, you have all these different global exchanges, and they're not integrated with each other.
Do you think that that's inherently human nature, like them wanting to almost like own their own platform and their data in order to be able to profit or generate revenue? Is that how we are naturally wired to create something for ourselves as opposed to just genuinely having the sense of community?
Yeah, I don't think it's inherent. If you are a payment platform, then you want your users to be able to use their money within your payment system in as broad a way as possible. Because the more compatibility you have anywhere you go, the more your users will find your platform useful. If PayPal were integrated everywhere in the world,
right,
then I would be a PayPal user because I could come here and use PayPal, right? And I think that the reason why we have so much fragmentation is the fact that there isn't in the traditional financial system, a very efficient, universal way for these systems to interact. And the original vision of Web3 or blockchain technologies was to introduce a new way of doing things that scaled trust in the way that would allow for all platforms to become integrated by removing the need for trust, in fact, by creating a unified internet-based system that any application can connect to and use to securely communicate with all other applications. And that's what it would allow, you would still have apps like Samsung Pay that would be popular here, and you would have apps like Venmo that would be popular in the US, but it would be much easier when we travel worldwide to use our local app in a foreign setting, and it would simplify cross-border payments. You can imagine that if a payment in one app can be synchronized with an action in a different platform, maybe it could be something like Coupang or something involving Naver, right? And yet the payment is actually being done on Venmo, right? If all apps just can easily, securely communicate with each other without requiring a deep, trusted business relationship between the entities that develop those platforms, you would create supreme efficiencies that would transform the way commerce works globally.
Yeah.
Even more so for the trading of digital assets, I would say, where liquidity is so important. The ability to find a counter buyer or seller if you're trying to sell or buy a digital asset is crucial to what makes certain exchanges more successful than others. And if you're trading stocks on NASDAQ, you're only being matched with other traders who are interested in buying or selling stocks on NASDAQ. You're not being matched in real time with buyers or sellers on global exchanges. And if we have one unified system where all digital assets are recorded, even if they're recorded within certain applications that have a friendly interface that users within a certain jurisdiction can use to connect to the global internet of value, if you can have all of these platforms communicate with each other in real time, you wouldn't have exchanges based on jurisdiction. You would just be able to place your order on the internet and it could be matched in real time with any other internet user in any country, anywhere, who's interested in taking the other side of your trade. That's the vision.
Right. And that wasn't possible in the Web 2 world.
It was not. Yeah, it was not because you don't have a universally integrated web of applications.
Yes. And in Web 3, would you say that would have been sort of the original vision of Ethereum?
That was the original vision. We have not achieved that yet.
Right.
Web 3 today, unfortunately, still replicates the fragmentation that you have in Web 2.
Yeah. How do you think that happened, though? Because, like, what was your experience when you first encountered Ethereum? Yeah, and where were you in life?
So I've been in the space for a long time. I got interested in Bitcoin in 2012. I was doing a research internship at the time. I was getting into cryptography, and I was just doing a research project on the Bitcoin network and how it was being used. I went to graduate school at Stanford, started my PhD in cryptography, and that's when things started really taking off. Ethereum was launched the year before that I started grad school. And in my first year of grad school, I started getting involved in the space in a much deeper way. I ended up developing the main protocol of Filecoin, which was a project that developed around 2017. And that became part of my PhD thesis, designing the Filecoin protocol. And then I went on to be quite involved in cryptography that influenced the development of Ethereum. Ethereum, unlike Bitcoin, went through a lot of development. It was one of the things that really differentiated Ethereum from Bitcoin was the fact that it was so open to innovation. It recognized the fact that the original version of Ethereum was not as efficient as it could be. The goals of Ethereum were a lot different than the goals of Bitcoin. Bitcoin was simply supposed to be a new asset that wasn't controlled by anyone, whereas Ethereum was more what we associate with Web3. Bitcoin isn't quite Web3. Ethereum it was really the first main Web3 project that wanted to transform the way global commerce worked, to build a system where all web applications could be integrated without the need for centralized trust. So I got very, very into that vision and very involved in developing new cryptographic tools that could be used to improve the efficiency of Ethereum. What you actually asked before, which is why Web3 hasn't achieved its vision yet. And the reason that Web3 hasn't achieved its vision yet, I would say, is due to a multitude of factors. So number one, the first problem was scalability. We realized that no chain, including Ethereum, was scalable enough to handle the entire internet of value, to handle the entire world of web applications. Yep. It just wasn't scalable enough, right? Not only was the protocol itself, slow in certain ways and could use room for improvement, but even if we made those improvements, no individual blockchain is scalable enough to do this. So we came up with a new way of doing things that involves many, many, many chains. And it's much closer to the way that Web 2 works, where if you build an internet-based application, you bring your own computers, you bring your own web servers, you build your own system, and you run it independently, and you can communicate through various means with other web applications. You may have an e-commerce system like Coupang, but then the actual payment may happen over Naver Pay or Samsung Pay, and the same in the US, where you're paying something over Amazon, but you end up using Zelle or PayPal or a credit card, company, which is also a type of web application in the end if it's digital based. So web applications bring their own servers and run their own so-called chain, just a centralized chain. And so we have now the same thing in Web 3, where we have many, many different blockchains. And the key difference from Web 2 is that we found a way for many blockchains to share a common source of security, a common source of truth, as some people call it, that allows all of them to communicate with each other securely without having to worry about one of the systems being hacked. Okay, so if one of the systems is hacked, it does not affect the security of the other systems because they're all sharing a common base layer blockchain or layer 1 blockchain. So this is where the layer 1 and layer 2 comes in. On the layer 2, you can run many web applications, so many different chains, and they can all share the security of a common layer 1. The problem is, now we have many chains, just like we have many web applications. And even though they have ways to communicate with each other securely, they don't interact with each other quickly enough. Because layer 1s, until recently, until we built Espresso really, layer 1s like Ethereum were too slow. They don't confirm transactions fast enough.
How slow are they?
It takes about 15 minutes to confirm a transaction on Ethereum.
That's very slow. Yeah.
It is very slow. And it's not only 15 minutes, but these, for efficiency reasons, the chains that run on top. So the web chain has just become the new name for web application, right? So the web applications that run on top, they don't even post their transactions to the layer one, Ethereum very often. They may wait a few minutes, they may even wait up to a few hours. And so the time it takes to communicate between them could be anywhere from 15 minutes to hours, which is not enough to unify payment systems. It's not enough to unify liquidity for trading. And that's why we still have within the Web3 space the same fragmentation that we had before in Web 2. So the missing piece to solve that is a system that can simultaneously allow for many chains to exist on top in a scalable way, but that also is very fast and confirm the transactions happening in these different web applications close to real time, within less than a second, ideally.
Less than a second.
Less than a second would be ideal.
And that's where you come in as
that's why we started developing Espresso, because we realized that Ethereum in its modern form, is I think it really hit the right architecture in terms of the vision of having many chains work on top of it. I think that's what makes Ethereum more promising than any other ecosystem. I think it will dominate Solana, dominate Sui, dominate all these other networks that don't have that architecture. But the problem with Ethereum as it was originally designed is that it's not fast enough to unify the chains that run on it. And it leads to fragmentation, which erodes the original vision of Web3. And so the missing piece would be something that is like Ethereum, but is much faster. And that is what Espresso is. Espresso is like Ethereum in that it's what Ethereum would look like if it were designed to host many chains. Ethereum wasn't originally designed to host many chains. It was originally designed to be one chain, and then we realized it wasn't scalable enough, so we built many chains on top. If it had been designed from the get-go, from the beginning, to host many, many chains, it would look like what Espresso looks like today.
Since you mentioned Sui and Solana, do you think that's the way they intended to build so that they can host many chains as layer one?
They don't, as far as I know, have that vision. In fact, Solana has been pretty vocal about the fact that having many layer 2 chains on top does not really fall in line with their vision. I don't even know that Solana's ambition is to host the entire Internet of Web applications. Solana has always been very focused on basically building a global decentralized exchange, etc. Essentially, fundamentally, you can't have one blockchain, whether it's Solana or Sui or Ethereum, host all web applications. You hit computation bottlenecks at some point. And so fundamentally, the correct architecture, in my view, both as an academic, as an entrepreneur, is to have a system that its only job is to receive data, make that data available and accessible, and maintain a consistent ordering of that data. This defines the ordering of transactions in all the different applications that work on top. So when you introduce a new application, it basically, instead of writing its transactions to its own system, it writes those transactions to this universal ledger that maintains the ordering of transactions, and it makes that data accessible and available. And that's all it needs to do. It's very easy to scale a system that only does that. All the things that are very specific to the applications, like verifying payments or verifying actions in a game or processing trades within an exchange, they don't happen on this global system. They happen within the applications on top. But once you know the ordering of transactions, then anyone can confirm what's happening in these applications by just reading those transactions and replaying them. So that is the correct architecture for Web3 in my view. And I think only Ethereum and now Espresso really are following that vision. Espresso is just much faster than Ethereum. And that's why I believe that Espresso is sort of the missing piece to, I think, achieve the ultimate vision of Web3.
Do the Ethereum community feel the same way about Espresso?
Well, it's interesting that you ask that. So I actually consider myself part of the Ethereum community. And there is, I would say, somewhat of a divide in the Ethereum community in terms of perspectives on what Ethereum is. If you think of Ethereum in a very literal way as one protocol, this specific layer 1 protocol, then of course Espresso is different from that. But so are all the layer 2s in a way, right? And on the other hand, if you think of Ethereum more as a community and a mindset, a community that shares a certain vision for Web3, that shares a certain opinion on how things should be architected, then it's much broader.
Much broader.
Much broader. And I think that is what Ethereum is. It's not one protocol. It's all these other protocols that have come out of the Ethereum community. Yeah. And the interesting thing is that you can use Espresso in combination with Ethereum in a very powerful way. You can have systems that use Espresso to confirm transactions in real time. You can use Espresso to connect and unify all these different worldwide payment systems like Samsung Pay and PayPal and WeChat Pay and Line Pay and Alipay and all the crypto payment systems too, right? You can use Espresso to unify all blockchains that also have some kind of bridge to Ethereum. So when you combine these systems, you get something which is more powerful than the two of them individually. And we today service many chains that also have a bridge to Ethereum. And a bridge to Ethereum mostly means that they have the ability to custody Ethereum assets, like ETH, handle ETH payments, handle ETH within applications that are built on them, and also allow users to withdraw that ETH back to Ethereum without introducing any new trust assumptions. And so that is possible for chains to do, even if they're leveraging Espresso to have this fast, real-time interoperability with each other.
Is it your job as an entrepreneur and founder of Espresso to convince the market, all these applications and roll-ups that, hey, we want to be that sort of universal confirmation layer. So, it'll benefit you, of course.
Right.
So it is obviously your job to communicate value. There's like, why should they come on board?
Right.
And do you think that itself is a tough process because you need to sign these people up?
Yes, it's always difficult to build something where the value comes from the network effect. Right. If you're building a social network, if you're building an exchange, if you're building a payment system, all of these require network effects. On the other hand, the very powerful thing of building something with a network effect is that once it has momentum, right, it's sort of self-fulfilling, right? And so our main goal now is, first of all, to communicate what we're building to the world, to communicate what we're building to applications, to anyone who's not only in the Web3 space already, but is considering coming into the Web3 space. One of the things that I find very disturbing right now is how foreign crypto looks to more traditional Web2 based systems. Look, the majority of commerce still happens in Web2 based systems. So if we want this technology to transform the world, we have to make it more accessible. And now people think, oh, in order to become integrated with Web3, I need to develop a blockchain that runs the Ethereum virtual machine. Right. I mean, that is the number one thing that is going to gatekeep the system, right? Or they think, oh, well, I'm going to run a layer 2, but I need to run like Arbitrum stack or OP stack or one of these things. And as soon as even just the vocabulary is like, what are you talking about? What planet are you from? In reality, any traditional web application can become a Web3 chain without doing any of that.
Yeah.
Just by posting its transactions to a base layer like Espresso. And so that's another goal of ours, which is to not only cater to people who are already in Web3, but people who are out of Web3 and get them to realize that the only thing that you need to do if you want to transform something like Samsung Pay into a chain is to write the transactions that you currently write to your local database to Espresso or something like Espresso. That makes those transactions universally, globally available to anyone to figure out and verify that a payment completed within Samsung Pay. It doesn't require a complete redesign of the way the system works.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I feel like if I'm in the shoes of these guys,
you're right.
Like it's just so far beyond the realm of what's possible for them, because they've never seen anything like that. That even though you try to communicate like, no, this is what's possible at the global scale, they're like, yeah, but like, what's the catch? Like, for example, do you keep the data? Like I could see so many like potential pushbacks, right?
Yeah. I don't know that this is very different or very foreign to people in Web 2. I think what's foreign to people in Web 2 is crypto and the whole culture around crypto and NFTs and all these things that have new names, even something like stable coins, okay? Stable coins are not different from dollars or won or any traditional asset that is digital, right? There's a bank somewhere that holds a reserve of dollars and creates a digital representative of the dollar or the won within a system. So a stable coin is not different than a Zelle dollar or a euro or something else, right? But we have a new name for it, right? And that, I think, is unfortunately what is keeping a lot of Web 2 from adopting Web 3. Also, the idea that you have to redesign things to work within a new environment like the Ethereum virtual machine. It's totally not necessary. And maybe it was necessary before because the generation 1 way of building blockchains was to build one integrated blockchain and everything would run through a smart contract. Even these names like smart contracts seem foreign, right? So if you're going to redesign Samsung Pay as a smart contract, well, not only does that sound scary, but it sounds extremely different. And the reality is it is different. You have to write it in a different language. It's a completely new type of software development. It has its own set of security vulnerabilities. It's a daunting task. But with the generation 2 of building blockchains where we are today, you don't have to do that anymore. And it's taken some time for people to catch up to that. The only thing that you need to do is use this global base layer, which is not running smart contracts. All it's doing, its job is to receive data, make that data available, and keep its order consistent. People are familiar with that concept. It's called a database. It's just a more secure database. And everyone's familiar with writing to their local database. So this just becomes a global database that you can write to, and it allows other applications to communicate with you securely. People are also familiar with the idea of communicating with other applications. It's just done through kind of more bespoke integrations from business to business. This scales that up so that you write to this global database and provide some kind of application interface, some kind of API for anyone to read from your system in a permissionless way. Of course, you could permission it if you wanted to, but you don't have to form a business relationship in order to do that.
So when you're, let's say, having meetings with guys at Samsung and Naver, you talk to them about these things. Do they, especially Samsung, it's like a bit bureaucratic, like very sort of old school. Do they get it? Like, cause I feel like they're still stuck at the, as you said, smart contract. Like, oh, it sounds really difficult.
Right.
But when you explain it to them, do they get it?
Well, everyone that I talk to, I explain this to, and I think generally people understand when in a one-on-one conversation. But I think that in any technology realm, the most challenging thing is getting people to relearn things that they've had the wrong kind of preconception about.
Yeah.
And I think crypto has this problem tremendously.
Well, I mean, yeah, because you see on the news and constantly people
Right.
are losing money, getting scammed.
Right.
And yeah.
But it's also a technology that has developed very quickly over the last 5-10 years. Yeah. And because the way that we can do things today actually looks quite different from the way that we did things maybe 5 years ago, that's why it is difficult to get people to reimagine how they can do things. I think it's today easier than ever to integrate any Web 2 application into Web 3. And that's a very exciting thing.
Yeah.
But it's going to take work to convince Web 2 applications to go through this transformation and to have them realize that this isn't actually that foreign from what they're used to. It's just a more secure way for all web applications in the world to interact with each other, and that's going to transform commerce. It's going to transform markets. It's going to transform other things too, right? I think it's very cool to see people now using these global, ledgers for IP ownership and digital rights. I mean, you see what Story Protocol is doing, for example. You see even rights to, K-pop now being put on Story Protocol, rights to books, rights to music. That is something that can be done as well within kind of a globally integrated system that is very different from the way that it worked before. And it doesn't look that different from Web 2. It's just an upgrade to how, people interact with web applications and how web applications interact with each other.
So you mentioned about this like a giant global database,
right?
That exists as, let's say, a confirmation or a coordination layer,
right,
to Ethereum. So you guys are not Ethereum.
We're not Ethereum.
You make it way faster and more efficient.
And even beyond Ethereum, we service anyone, whether they're in Ethereum or not. We were born, I would say, out of the Ethereum mindset, and a lot of us came from the Ethereum community, but we built Espresso to be something that any web application can use, whether it was in Web 2 or in Web 3 already, whether it was in Ethereum or not. We're starting to work even with layer 1 protocols to get them to realize that they can use Espresso as a foundational layer that they can build their layer 1 on in order to be more integrated with everyone else.
So let's get a little more technical.
Sure.
So when you're building that protocol layer,
right.
However you name that, like, I know you have this consensus protocol called Hotshot. So maybe you can explain what that is exactly and how that actually works.
Perfect. Yeah. So Hotshot is a new consensus protocol that we developed over many years. It's built on other previous consensus protocols, but it is extremely high throughput, meaning it can process many, many, many transactions per second. And it is also very low latency. And in fact, we even have now improvements on the current version that we haven't upgraded the protocol to yet. And that we believe will bring down the confirmation times to less than a second. Okay.
Wow.
And that is something that is, I think, really amazing to achieve in a decentralized protocol. So the way the protocol works, like other consensus protocols, is that it has many different validator nodes that participate, so computers around the world that participate. Anyone can sign up to basically join and run a computer that participates. With the Espresso token, which is kind of the utility token that people use to participate, anyone who owns Espresso tokens can basically lock them up and basically use the fact that they've locked up these tokens to participate in running a node. And if they misbehave, then they would lose those tokens. So it keeps them incentivized to run the protocol, just like Ethereum does this with ETH. The way that these nodes end up maintaining this global trusted database is they run a protocol where the transactions that are sent to the system are all basically communicated between the nodes. Everyone who receives a transaction broadcasts that transaction to everyone else. What's different about this protocol from protocols like Ethereum is that because the system does not need to understand what's happening in these transactions, no individual node has the complete data for the whole system. And that's what allows us to scale very well. The job of the system is to maintain the availability of the data, and it's to maintain the ordering of the data. But the individual nodes that are participating in this protocol individually do not need to hold a copy of every single transaction. And that's what allows us to scale. It also creates new opportunities for lowering the time it takes to send a transaction to the system and get confirmation that it has been ordered and that the order in which it was processed will not change. Because we do not need to wait for all the different validators participating in the system to verify every transaction. That can become a big bottleneck if you have many different applications running on top. To give an example, imagine if every payment system in the world were using this, then you would need to wait for every node participating in the protocol to verify every Samsung Pay transaction, every Venmo transaction, every PayPal transaction, every Alipay transaction. We don't do that. They don't know anything about what's happening. Their only job is to collectively, as a group, through this consensus protocol, maintain the ordering, availability, and consistency of the data. Let me first kind of give a simplified explanation of how that works. The way consensus protocol works is nodes who are participating basically broadcast transactions to other nodes, and at some point a block of transactions is proposed to be the next block to be kind of appended to this list of transactions, and everyone signs that block. These are digital signatures, right? And they're broadcasted to everyone else. They're basically just attestations from the different nodes that they are aware that this block is the next being appended. And you go through 2 rounds of this voting process, where first everyone acknowledges that they received the block, and then everyone acknowledges that they've received evidence that everyone else acknowledged that they received the block. Okay, so you go through this 2 rounds of voting, and then everyone knows that everyone agrees that this is the next block. The key thing that's different in a consensus protocol like Espresso that does not require everyone individually to receive a copy of the whole block is that the block itself is split up into many pieces using a technology called erasure coding. And this is something that's a tool that's used in networks for efficiency, but we use erasure coding to split up this block into many different pieces. We cut it up into pieces and we distribute those pieces across the network. And so people end up, nodes, computers that are participating, end up voting on after seeing just a slice of the whole data. But collectively, because there are many of them participating, once enough signatures have been collected, there is evidence that if you contacted enough of these nodes, you'd be able to recover the data, right? And also that because of the way the signatures have been collected, you're convinced that the ordering of the data is fixed and it won't change.
I see.
Okay, so that's an oversimplified explanation, but that's roughly how it works. It's just a modernization of consensus protocols, and of course there are many other smaller details on how we achieve such low latency, but that's the general idea.
When you say people vote on that, like, does that require unanimous sort of like a consensus or like a majority, like 2/3 or something like that?
Yes. Yeah. So it's very similar to other consensus protocols in that regard. It's if people are familiar with Tendermint or even elements of Ethereum's consensus, it has many of those same elements. It's very related to the way that those protocols work. This is how consensus protocols, the majority of consensus protocols have worked for 20 plus years. But that is how it works. It's not an opinionated vote. It's not like voting for a politician, right? It's more that, okay, I'm attesting to the fact that I received this block. This is the one that I saw was proposed. At any given time, there's some appointed node who is proposing a block, and then everyone else is just attesting to the fact that they saw that proposal. And once you go through enough rounds of voting, you're convinced that everyone is on the same page about which block is being appended next, right? And now nobody needs to hold the whole block. They just need to know that enough votes were collected, that block, the order in which that block was processed won't change. Now, the primary party that would be responsible for keeping the data is still the application. So if Samsung Pay, for example, is creating a new block of transactions and writing it to this global database, they end up being the block proposer, and the network just ends up voting on this block.
Yep.
And within less than a second, Samsung servers can basically get confirmation that this global database received and approved it doesn't need to go through any real approval. It's not verifying anything. It received an acknowledged receipt of this block, and it has now put it in its database, and that won't change, right? And Samsung has that data. So as long as Samsung doesn't lose that data, you actually never need to even get the data from this global database. The only reason this global database is there is to make sure that if Samsung loses it, then it's still there. It's still part of the history. If Samsung were hacked, for example, then the data still exists. It's not lost. So transactions that were previously confirmed couldn't be forgotten, even if a hacker was, managed to compromise Samsung servers and erase a huge swath of data. That data is still accessible within this global system. It could even be encrypted, right? It could even be encrypted if privacy is a concern. It could be encrypted, and then the keys would be stored somewhere, and the keys could be stored even on Samsung's, cold storage servers that weren't hacked, and that could be used to retrieve the data from this global database and decrypt it. And finally, when someone meaning another application, like Amazon is trying to verify a payment completed in Samsung Pay, they could verify a message that they received from Samsung against this global database, which is not providing the data to Amazon. It's just confirming that the data that Samsung is providing is consistent with the data that was received by this global database.
So right now, that's just not possible with all these fragmented, they just they could get hacked. And there's just nothing like this that's in existence
in
right
Web
now.
2. Yeah. In Web 3, you could use Ethereum for this, but Ethereum is way too slow to do this in a way that would make a big difference. It's just not feasible to wait 15 minutes for transaction confirmation. And that's why we developed Espresso. It looks like Ethereum, but it is much faster. And it therefore can be used in combination with Ethereum, which will always be the blockchain that hosts the asset ETH. I think ETH is not going anywhere. ETH has become so integrated into Web3. It's used in many applications. It's become an important world asset. And I think Ethereum will always be the protocol that runs ETH, but it won't be the protocol, at least the layer 1 protocol in my view. It won't be the protocol that powers the entire internet because it's not designed to do that.
No, I really understand it. Like now I can see how it's adding massive value towards the vision of, but at the same time, what are some of your biggest challenges right now?
Well, adoption, right? So again, in anything like this, the value grows with adoption. The value grows with the entire world treating this as a system that they'll write their transactions to a system that they'll trust as a secure source of information about what happened in other applications. And so we need the entire internet of web applications to use Espresso. And that is the biggest challenge.
And maybe you could also talk about Espresso DA, like the data availability and how, again, I'm just personally out of curiosity, is that something that could also can get hacked or something?
So Espresso DA is a component of what I described. So if you noticed, I kept saying this global database, this global confirmation layer, right? It maintains the availability and the consistency of data, potentially from the entire internet of web applications, which allows them to communicate securely with each other. And it also,
it's not sitting in some centralized location.
Exactly.
That's the point.
It can sit in centralized locations too. So that, as I said, like Samsung Pay could still maintain its data.
Yeah.
Naver could maintain its data. Amazon could maintain its data. Venmo could maintain its data, and existing blockchains like, Arbitrum and Base or whatever, they can maintain their data on their sequencers, on their servers. But the data is also remembered by this global system so that if any of those individual systems get hacked, the data isn't lost. If the data were lost, then it would undermine the transaction confirmations that were previously given, because those transactions could be lost and overwritten. A payment system could forget the fact that you sent a payment, and then the confirmation that you got would be forgotten. So as a part of confirming transactions, Espresso Network needs to remember those transactions, because it needs to enable anyone later to sync with the system and replay and get the same exact version of history. So any consensus protocol that has the job to do what we're doing with Espresso Network has to also be a data availability system. We do everything that other data availability systems do. Everything that Eigen or Celestia or any of these systems do, we do as well, but we do so much more. Right? We create something that can power the entire internet of value. It can empower the entire web of internet applications and provide them with a way of communicating with each other in real time, which I view as the core of Web3. It's not a slice of what Web3 is, it's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Zero-knowledge proofs are important as well. They come in on top. The way that zero-knowledge proofs come into play is when one application running on the system sends a message to another. How does it communicate that message? So this other application receiving the message, and the message could be, for example, a confirmation that some payment completed in an application like Samsung Pay, or a payment on Base, or a payment on Arbitrum, right? And so how does some other application, let's say, up its new L2 GUI, right? So how does that verify that this payment completed in these other applications? Well, it's not running those applications. That wouldn't be scalable. All these systems run their own processes. They're not verifying each other's transactions. So they need a way to verify the fact that this transaction completed on this other blockchain. What do they verify it against? Well, they verify it against this public database, but they need a proof against this database that was the case. So if they fetched the transaction data from Espresso and replayed the transactions, they could verify the payment directly. It wouldn't be scalable. So instead, they can get a zero-knowledge proof that if they had done that, this is what they would get. They would have confirmed the transaction. All zero-knowledge proofs allow you to do is to prove to someone that if they ran a computer program on some input, they would get some output. So it allows you to prove to someone else or some other application that is not actually running that computer program the result they would have gotten if they ran it. It's a very powerful technology. It's actually the primary thing that has been my research focus for my entire academic career. It's a very, very powerful, transformative technology, and it's essential for this whole vision of a scalable yet interoperable Web3.
Right. And there's also the optimistic proof.
I don't really like the whole design of optimistic proofs, but and I think that we're so close to having the ability to create zero-knowledge proofs that can be created in real time fast enough, and it's just a much cleaner, more secure way of doing things that I think that the entire
that would
future
sort of become the industry.
It will
benchmark.
become the industry. Yeah. The combination of zero-knowledge proofs and a system like Espresso gives you everything that you need in Web3. So that's why the time is right now.
Yeah. Sounds like really exciting though.
It's very exciting.
It just sounds so big.
It is so big. So I was on stage yesterday at Impact. We had a panel together with Uma from Succinct Labs and Sandeep from Polygon. And I was explaining how I think that the three different platforms that we're building are kind of the three pillars of Web3. You have a base layer that is scalable, that serves as a global database for ordering all transaction data and making that data available. And then you have a zero-knowledge proof system that can be used to communicate between these different systems in a scalable way on top of the base layer. You need a base layer because otherwise what are you proving? You can't prove something without having something to prove against, right? And the third pillar would be a way to kind of aggregate all of these things together, which is AgLayer is sort of a way of taking the proofs that have been produced by many different applications and aggregating them together into a single proof, which creates new efficiencies.
So have you guys released your main net?
Yeah, so Espresso network has actually been running since November 24. So it's been running for almost a year at this point, and it has been running on what we call mainnet 0. Okay. It's a permissioned network currently. It has 100 distributed validators that globally run the system. And we've integrated many chains. Most recently, we just integrated ApeChain. We've worked with the developers of Arbitrum Off-Chain Labs for a 2-year collaboration on an integration that would be with Arbitrum 1. And that has to go through a DAO approval first, but we expect for that to happen this year. We're integrating now with Celo, which is in the OP ecosystem. Celo is special because Celo has this application Opera on it, which is a payments platform that has like 1 million users worldwide. And so once Celo comes onto Espresso, then there's going to be like 1 million worldwide users doing payments that are supported by Espresso, which is incredible.
That's cool. Yeah.
When you are working with other businesses, you only think that you're working with a handful of businesses who are developing these chains, but each of those businesses
They have these
thousands
users,
to millions of users. And so suddenly you have all these users and you have this exponential growth. But with our mainnet 1, which is happening soon and will coincide with the token generation event, the operation of the network will transition from a permissioned set of validators to a permissionless set of validators. And anyone who holds Espresso tokens will be able to stake those tokens to participate.
Well, and right now, as a permissioned validators, like how do you choose them?
The reason to have many different validators is so that it's not easy to hack the system, right? In order to compromise the security of Espresso, you would have to hack more than 1/3 of the different nodes that are participating. And so we ran a competitive process where we hand selected 100 validators that basically went through our process, and we reviewed their applications, and we just intentionally selected them in a way that we would believe would maximize the health and security of the system. I think that's actually a perfectly fine way of designing blockchains. In fact, I think permission networks are actually still quite secure because ultimately the goal is to make it difficult to hack, right?
Right, yeah.
But I think the powerful thing about transitioning to a permissionless network is that you can scale that process up so much, and also that you can have economic value at stake, so that not only is there difficulty in compromising the system because you have to compromise and hack so many different globally distributed uncooperating nodes, but you now also have to, you might be able to compromise them otherwise by bribing many nodes. And so the theory is that if there's economic value behind this, then it becomes more difficult to bribe. So it's already secure, in my view, to just run a permissioned 100 node network, or even 100 plus nodes, 200 nodes, 1,000 nodes. It's hard to know when between going from 100 to 1,000 where exactly you hit diminishing returns. But the one thing that you additionally prevent by going from a something that is permission to proof of stake is not only are you no longer the gatekeeper on who can participate, but there's also now economic value that prevents bribery.
And just as secure as
Yes.
well. Yeah. Do you guys have any competitors at the moment that you consider to be like doing pretty much exactly what you're doing?
Yes. It's funny to say this, but in a way, Ethereum is a competitor, right? Because Ethereum can be used as a base layer. It's not fast enough, but there are certain people within the Ethereum community, particularly at the foundation, that want to improve the protocol of Ethereum to be faster.
Right.
They'll never be able to get Ethereum to have less than a second confirmation. So in that sense, I don't think that it is directly competitive. I think there will always be value in using Espresso in combination with Ethereum. But I think it's important to recognize that.
I see. So there are attempts being done at trying to improve Ethereum as a layer one.
That is true, yeah. But you would have to completely change the way Ethereum works. You would have to completely re-architect the protocol to get less than a second finality times. So less than a second.
I don't know if the community will.
Right. I mean, I don't even think it's a good idea for them to do that. I think that it would be unfortunate for them to do that because Ethereum has other advantages, right? Ethereum is designed to, basically have, World War III grade security. I mean, they have extremely high security, and it has 100% uptime. It never goes down, right? Yeah. And it's prioritized that over having speed.
Yep. Or Solana is like the
opposite, right? Yeah. And so Espresso is more towards the Solana camp in terms of prioritizing speed, which I think is necessary if we're going to actually enable applications to use the system. But you can still have things like Ethereum that manages the asset ETH and works the way it does today and provides complementary value. But there are other competitors who haven't quite moved into our arena, but may move into our arena. So for example, Celestia, it's a data availability system. So as I said, it doesn't quite do what we do, but they could move into doing what we do as well, because Celestia does run a consensus protocol. It doesn't run a consensus protocol that is as performant as ours, and they haven't designed the product to provide fast finality to all chains. They just provide data availability. But they are moving in that, they could be moving in that direction. In fact, they've talked about moving in that direction. And so they could become a competitor in that sense.
You don't sound that concerned though.
Well, I don't think it's concerning because we're all in the same camp. We're trying to build a technology that transforms the world. I welcome and embrace having competitors. We're on a common mission here. The mission is to get Web 2 to adopt this new way of communicating securely worldwide across all web applications. The goal here is to dissolve the liquidity silos that we have. It's to transform the way finance works. It's to make it so that anyone, anywhere can just connect to the internet and pay anyone else in the world and not worry about what platform they're on. The goal is to get rid of NASDAQ. When you're on that, and Shanghai Stock Exchange and like all these global exchanges that just shouldn't exist, right? And so if you're on that mission, then it's great to have other people who are trying to do the same thing.
Were you always the type of person who had this crazy vision that you just want to fundamentally transform things? Is that something that I don't know, like you've had from early childhood, or like only after you discovered Ethereum that you just start seeing possibilities?
Well, when I was younger, I wanted to be a musician, so I don't know that I had the ambition to transform
the entire financial system.
The entire financial system. Yeah, I wanted to be a composer. Really? I wanted to write film music. So,
and then you somehow became Stanford PhD, and then
right, it seemed more practical, right?
Right.
But ever since entering the blockchain space, I've been motivated by this vision.
Wow.
And it's been disappointing that Web3 has become something else, right? And yet at the same...
If you don't do anything, do you think it's going to continue to go down that path and it's even worse than what it is today? Is that what you forecast? Or like, unless you do something about it?
I think that in Web3, it's very important, if you have a clear vision for where it should go, to be very vocal and active in doing that, because I do think that there is a risk that it doesn't go in that direction otherwise. So, while I can't say that if I weren't here that it wouldn't go the way that I wanted, I feel that there's enough of a risk that we wouldn't achieve the original vision of Web3 if we weren't building Espresso, and that's why we're building Espresso. Sometimes you're in other areas like doing research in zero-knowledge proofs, and there's so many people improving the technology that if you stepped away, the technology would still progress.
Yeah.
If everyone stepped away, the technology wouldn't progress. But it's very clear what to do with zero-knowledge proofs. The goal is straightforward. There's no disagreement about what the goal is. We want to make it easy to verify computations.
Right. But in this case,
there is not a uniform idea of how Web3 should work. There's not a uniform idea of how to market Web3 to the world, of how to go about getting the world to adopt Web3. And so I think it is super important that if you have a strong vision about how Web3 should work, to build out that vision yourself.
Let's just play that out, like as far as just becoming total dystopian type of future. What does that look like then? What's the worst case scenario if this fragmentation just continues?
Well, the worst case scenario is that Web3 just continues to be something that doesn't really transform the way commerce or finance works. It just becomes a alternative casino for various kinds of assets, right? And then it's not that different. Having tokenized stocks is not actually that different from the way that we handle stocks today, and I don't want to come off as saying that we haven't done anything in Web3 already to create at least a glimmer of something new, right? Stablecoin payments already are quite useful in largely overcoming just bureaucracy and crazy inefficiencies that we had before. So in many ways, even though Web3 is so fragmented, it's still a new and shiny digital system. And so it's gotten around a lot of bureaucracy. I don't think for deep technological reasons yet has it transformed the world, but it has at least gotten around bureaucracy. I think that we're so close to actually creating a system that has the power to completely transform the way commerce that works. And so that's why I would say, while I'm positive on the progress that has been made, I am still disappointed that we haven't quite achieved the vision that Web3 started out with, but I remain very optimistic that we will achieve it.
And where do you think, if you keep up that optimistic spirit, where do you think that Espresso can be in, like, let's say 3 years or even like next year? Like, what kind of progress will you guys have made?
Well, by next year, I would like to see us have less than a second transaction confirmation times, which is, I think, sufficient to...
So you guys are getting there now.
We're getting there, right? And I also want to have a so-called SDK, right, which is going to enable us to scale our integrations at a much faster pace. Right now, every different chain or platform that wants to integrate with us, we work closely with to integrate. I want to make it so that anyone with a web application, even a Web 2 application, can easily integrate. I want to make it so that Samsung Pay could integrate with Espresso, their entire back-end system, without talking to me, right? And that's where I want to be in a year, I would say. Now, I'm...
Only in a year?
Well, in terms of the technology itself, right? Yeah. I want to have the APIs, I want to have the SDKs, I want to have the technology in the right place, but then it's going to be a multi-year process to get not only all chains that are within the current Web3 ecosystem using us, but the rest of the world as more of the global economy comes on chain. So within the next year, I do hope to see Arbitrum on us, and Arbitrum is one of the biggest layer 2 chains. And so I'm looking forward to that happening within the next year. I'm looking forward to integrating with the Polygon ecosystem. Wow. I'm looking forward to integrating, I hope, with more of the OP ecosystem. So currently we work with Celo, but there are many other chains within the OP ecosystem. I'd be very excited to integrate with World Chain, for example, or Base. I think that...
Even World Chain?
That would be World Chain has a lot of users.
Yeah.
Right? So we are interested in integrating all these different chains, right? Whether it happens within the next year or not, I can't say for sure. I'm fairly certain that Arbitrum will integrate within the next year, but I'd like to see, as much of the layer 2 ecosystem as possible integrate. But the layer 2 ecosystem on Ethereum today is scratching the surface. I want to see layer 1 protocols start to integrate us. So we're starting to work with layer 1 protocols that exist today to re-architect the way that they work so that they use Espresso as part of their infrastructure that makes them more integrated. And ultimately, I'd like to see corporations that have, Web 2 platforms start integrating with Espresso. And that's going to be a multi-year process, of course.
I suppose at the end of the day, end users, they probably won't even know what's going on other than, right?
Right. The goal is to keep it that way, right? So for end users, the impact on end users is more compatibility of their various digital wallets worldwide, so that you can travel anywhere in the world and use your wallet without anything looking different to you. Or you can do remittance payments, or you can do cross-border payments. Businesses can more easily do cross-border payments.
Except you guys probably won't get the credit that you deserve because everybody thinks, that's Samsung doing that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Right? That's okay, because we're transforming the world, and all transactions in the end of the day will be routing through Espresso Network. So certainly the operators of Espresso Network will be poised to capture
for sure,
a lot of value, right? And so even if we're not getting the recognition from consumers, that's okay.
Yeah.
The goal is to create a network effect whereby every single platform for digital assets, every single platform for payments, every single platform for exchange of digital assets is incentivized to not only incentivize, it is almost required, right, to integrate Espresso to access the deepest liquidity, to access the deepest compatibility worldwide. That's the goal. It's not to get recognition from consumers.
Although it's kind of nice if people knew what it is that you were able to accomplish, let's say.
That's true, but think about Visa or MasterCard, right? These networks are what enable people to go with their credit card worldwide and use it.
Yeah.
But when I use my credit card from Chase Bank in the US, right, I'm not really thinking about Visa.
Sure.
But Visa is what's enabling me to do this. And so in many ways, Espresso is trying to be like the Visa of blockchains. So
that's super simple to understand. So I'm just like curious, how do you manage your personal time? Because sounds like you got a lot on, and do you get stressed out? Sometimes how do you deal with stress? Like how are you doing as founder?
I think when you're building something that you're really passionate about, if you love your job, then
I can tell
you find it very motivating to, get up in the morning and do things. So I don't get stressed about the amount of work that we have. Of course,
what about your health? For example, you might have to travel constantly, and then maybe if you don't get enough sleep, or your circadian rhythm is all messed up or something. Like,
I travel for conferences like this, but I think that one of the things that has been nice in the last few years is that crypto conferences have become kind of the new way to do any kind of in-person business development as well. So I come here to KBW and end up meeting with many different potential partners and corporations, and whether they're developers or corporations or, potential interested investors or whatever it may be, I can get all that done within this compressed week. And so a lot of the other interactions that we have as entrepreneurs these days happens over Google Meets or Zoom, right? And so because we have these conferences that so many people come to, like KBW, like Token, like DevCon, it's a lot more efficient, actually. We don't travel weekly to meet with people.
Right.
I think that would really be inefficient. So I'm not traveling all the time, right? And I generally get sleep. I think that it's very important to get sleep if you're building anything important, right?
It's important because a lot of entrepreneurs they don't sleep.
I really don't agree with the mindset of not sleeping as an entrepreneur, because I think that if you're not able to think efficiently and effectively, then you're going to waste more time. So I think it's really important as an entrepreneur to get sleep, to stay healthy, to have.
But do you sort of deal with these moments of frustrations because maybe things might not be moving fast enough?
Yes, of course, right.
Then how do you kind of, because, I'm obviously trying to, get myself some perspective as well. Because sometimes, that things are just around the corner, but maybe just not freaking happening fast enough.
Of course, yeah.
How do you deal with that? Or do you just talk to your co-founders or?
Well, that is, as I was about to say earlier, that is the main source of stress as an entrepreneur. Is on the one hand, if you're passionate about what you're building, then you're very motivated to do anything you can to get it to work. But on the other hand, then you can become frustrated with progress, and you always want things to move faster than they actually move in reality.
Yeah.
And you just need to manage that. But that's also one reason to get sleep, to be healthy, right? Because you can manage stress better if you are healthy. It's good to have some kind of passion outside of it too. So I rock climb. I'm a big rock climber.
I was gonna say, like, you look like super athletic.
I got into rock climbing when I lived in California, and it's I think a really good outlet. It allows you to really focus. And I don't have a lot of time anymore to climb outside as much as I used to, but it's nice
definitely
that you
some
have
sort of
climbing
exercise.
gyms. And even here, when I come to Korea, I found that there was a climbing gym right next to my hotel.
I didn't even know there were climbing gyms.
There are very cute climbing gyms too. Right? Like you take anything that exists in the US, and suddenly you go to it here in Korea, and they know how to make it cute. A lot cuter than it was.
Mini version or?
Well, okay. So for example, for example, the inside
just
was aesthetically a lot more pleasing.
I see.
And also they have all these cup holders, right? For, if somebody has like tea or something, you can put it in a cup holder. These are the little things that make it.
Yeah, I think you're describing Korea very well. Like probably Korea and Japan, right? They tend to do these little things to.
I suppose, right? They have a place to wash your feet. It's nice to see that when I travel. It's nice to see the things that I do at home in a different context. And I've often traveled and I've met climbers in different countries, and it's a way to connect to people over some kind of shared hobby. And so I think having that outside of work is healthy for keeping things in perspective. So
I guess lastly, what advice would you share with, let's say, aspiring founders and entrepreneurs who might not be as technical or smart as you, because every time people, of course, Stanford PhD, of course, like a cryptographer, right? And so, like people might, especially a lot of young people, in Asia or even in the US, they might get kind of discouraged, like, I'm not that smart. I'm, like, I don't want to build the next AI or Web3 company, but I still have that entrepreneurial mindset. And I'm sure you know this because you talk to a lot of students as a professor, but like, how do you like motivate people or young people, or like, they're very passionate, they want to do something. So what kind of advice can you share with those people?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see myself as smarter than anyone else. There's different forms of intelligence. It's more also what you've chosen to focus on. And often I think the mindset of, look, I'm smarter than other people because you studied this area, or I'm a computer scientist, or this, that, or the other, or I'm technical versus. I think that actually that can really lead to not succeeding in entrepreneurship because you get, I think, conceited and sort of complacent about what's important. I think the worst thing to do as an entrepreneur is to just have a like self-invented, constructed vision of how things should work, and to not be open to understanding what people want and to be open to feedback. I think that anyone who is passionate about some vision, who's willing to learn, who's willing to listen, who's willing to change what they're doing based on feedback, is capable of being a very successful entrepreneur. When you build a company, you are not running everything yourself.
Right.
You hire people.
Well, at the beginning, you kind of have to do everything.
Of course. Well, you have to have a strong vision for what you're doing. But, even though I have a computer science background and I did a PhD in cryptography, that's not what I'm doing on a daily basis at Espresso, right? I have a strong vision for what it could be, but I don't need a PhD in computer science to have that vision. Anyone else could have that vision too. And you end up inspiring people to build this thing with you, and you end up hiring experts. And so the longer I've worked on Espresso, the farther I've kind of gravitated from the actual science behind what it does, because I'm able to hire a lot of people who are smarter than me in each of these different areas. I still do cryptography research. I'm a professor at Yale, right? I still do cryptography research because it's another passion of mine, and I mentor graduate students who work on this thing. But when it comes to building Espresso, I think that the thing that I do is inspire others to build out this vision, and I kind of direct the trajectory of what we're doing more so than anything else. And I think that anyone who is, passionate and open to feedback and willing to learn has the capability to do that.
Guess we'll end on that sort of very inspiring note. I personally, because I always feel like, but you're able to create a program like this that is so scalable and, you know, like, because with a few codes, I know that these days we can vibe code and everything, but still the fact that you have that background, technical background, means you're able to create a scalable product that possibly millions of users can use, right? So,
well, I didn't create it myself.
Sure, but
there's a big team behind Espresso Systems. And also, one of the wonderful things about building in Web3 is that you end up with a community of developers that even goes beyond your own original core development company. So Espresso Systems built the original version of the system, but one of the things about becoming a permissionless network is that we also hope to get participation from other developers within the broader community to make contributions. So it's very much not my own personal creation. It's the creation of many people. And I think that having a background in computer science, being a scientist myself, definitely helps me understand what's possible, and that assists the vision. But I meet so many people who do not have a computer science background who are able to develop that, such that I don't think the technical skills that I have were at all essential to becoming an entrepreneur.
Definitely hoping to be one of them myself. So that's very encouraging to hear. But anyway,
you seem like you'd be a really good entrepreneur. I mean, you are effectively an entrepreneur already, right?
Yeah, we've been doing this for a while,
right?
But yeah, I'm very excited to see where, you know, Espresso will go from here. Sounds like you guys got some big things planned.
Yeah.
But as a fan, really like to sort of keep just see how you guys progress, and then just because of your vision, what you are able to, like, oh, this is what the future should look like.
Right.
This is better for humanity. Like, yeah, I agree. But then isn't it amazing how just because of that one person's vision, some big things can happen that no other governments or, you know, these like people with money, you just can't do that. So I'm really fascinated by that aspect of like, oh, one person really can change the world. But if I say that, let's say in like 99% of people, they'll think, yeah, no, that's not true. You can't do that. Like, you know, especially like maybe in Asian culture or something, right? It's very much of a, I'm sure you heard this before, but yeah, just like, well, who do you think you are? You know?
Yeah.
You're not Steve Jobs. You're not.
But that's what I'm saying, which is that no one person can transform the world, right?
But he can spark the idea. Like, you know, it's that initial, like, oh, maybe that's possible. You know, like that creativity, human ingenuity, you know, it always starts with somebody or something. Right?
I suppose, but even in starting the company, I have 3 co-founders. I don't view anything that we've done at Espresso as coming solely from me. I certainly have a strong vision, and I want us to achieve that vision, but I'm building this together with so many other people. And I think even in creating that vision, I had the support of so many other people. So I would never say that I solely am transforming the world, but I'm doing what I can to facilitate that transformation.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm sure your team would appreciate that as well. Like how you guys are like a team and a community first.
Yeah, we do. That is a very important part of our culture.
Yeah.
And fostering community within Web3 is something that's really important too. And so I think we have a very strong community. Another reason why the name Espresso, right, to come back to the beginning of the conversation, I said Espresso brings communities together. And that was an important part of the like namesake of the product in terms of unifying different digital payment platforms and financial platforms and just web applications. I think it's also important to have a name that fosters a strong community. So because we want the community of developers, the community of users, the community behind Espresso and Espresso's vision to feel very integrated, we needed a name that would be inspiring in that way, right? But not intimidating and fun. And that's Espresso. right?
And very memorable. Very
right.
memorable, I think, which I think is like half the battle anyway.
Right.
So anyway, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time today.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Appreciate
and,
it.
I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Of course.